If I can ask you to put your phones on silent, you're welcome to tweet things if you want and use the Twitter handle at FCCHK. Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to welcome Campbell Brown. She used to be at CNN, NBC, and she's moved fairly recently to the dark side of commerce and social media. And here she is.
Hi, everybody. My font's too small. I'm going to have to wear my glasses, so forgive me. I just had a birthday, and my glasses are getting stronger and stronger with every birthday. But it's wonderful to be here with all of you. I am very new to Facebook. I just joined in January, so I'm still finding my way around and still think of myself, I think, as a journalist. Before this job, I had a 20-plus year career in journalism, most recently as an anchor and correspondent for NBC News and CNN. Over that time, I covered 3 U.S. presidential campaigns, the Clinton and George W. Bush White House years, moderated a number of presidential debates, and anchored a primetime show that was primarily focused on politics at CNN. I have always believed that journalism is a calling more than a job. Fearless, aggressive journalism especially. And in my view, the role of a journalist has never been as important as it is right now. It is a challenging time, though, for journalism, for the business of journalism, for the credibility of journalism also. There are a lot of issues we're grappling with. So it means a lot to me to be invited here to talk to all of you in a role very different from the one I had 20 years ago. I want to pick up on a question that I've been discussing with a number of people this week during my visit here in Hong Kong, which is digital technology making us more informed or less informed? One of the things that I've been doing since I took this job is trying to put these issues that we're grappling with around new media in a bit of a historical context. I think digital technology isn't making us more or less informed any more than TV or radio did in their heyday. Being informed isn't a state of having access to information. It's really about understanding information. And it's knowing the difference between good and bad information, between what's real and what's not real, and between what's true and what's false. The internet has brought us access to a lot of information and access to a lot of new sources of information. But if we want to be more informed and we want to understand the world, then we need more than just data. We need great journalism. And we need the work that's being done by a lot of the people in this room that give us insight, that ask the right questions, and that can give us context for what's happening in the world and explain what this really means to all of us. As I said before, modern journalism is facing a lot of challenges right now. We know that the business of journalism is changing rapidly and dramatically. And the reasons why are complex, especially here in a region as diverse, where political, social, and economic situations are so varied. So I do want to be a little bit careful today to not make too many generalizations. There is no question, though, I should say, that Facebook is a big part of this transformation that the news industry and that journalism is going through. Although if you really think about it, it's been a fairly recent development. Facebook being kind of a source for news and information. Prior to that, Facebook, back in the early days and really up until recently, was about connecting friends and family and sharing pictures of your kids and your nieces and nephews. That has changed and evolved with the community as the community has evolved. News is very much now a part of the equation. Now, it's true that Facebook is not a news organization. I do believe it is now a central part of the news ecosystem. And as a part of the news ecosystem, and we're a big part of it, with that comes real responsibility to work very closely with the industry and be a true partner with the news industry. That means supporting business models so that journalism isn't just surviving, but thriving. Working together to address false news and trying to solve challenges that we're seeing around news credibility issues. We want to be a strong partner, I think, at a moment where it's not clear to any of us what the future of journalism really looks like. We want to be a good partner because it's also part of our mission now to help build informed communities. And you can't have informed communities without great journalism. As I said, our mission, the role, the way we think about what Facebook is trying to do has expanded as this community has evolved. Mark Zuckerberg was very explicit recently in explaining this, that our goal as a company is not just to connect the world, but also help to build, the words he used, informed communities. Mark wrote in an open letter that many of you may have seen, which was made public in February. He laid out the vision for Facebook, and he calls out, quote, how the most important thing that we at Facebook can do is develop the social infrastructure to give people the power to build a global community that works for us, for all of us. It's not just enough to make the world more open and connected. We have to ask, are we helping to build the kind of community that exposes us to new ideas and builds common understanding in a world where every person has a voice? Journalism that investigates wrongdoing, holds powerful accountable, gives voices to the voiceless, shines a light on stories that need to be told, accurately reports breaking news. This is all at the core of informed communities. But there's another piece to this, and that is how we move from being informed to really understanding. And with the avalanche of all the information that's at our fingertips now, news literacy is more vital than ever. We should all care about helping people make smart decisions about the information that they see online and what sources to trust. And so part of why I'm in Hong Kong this week was to participate in discussions with the Asia Pacific News Literacy Group. Facebook partnered with the Hong Kong University and SOPA for a series of meetings with about 40 people who are experts in news literacy, where we focused on how we can improve news and digital literacy to get to real understanding. And I think the answer has three parts to it. We at Facebook have to do everything we can to mitigate the bad with technical solutions to try to fight fake news. We have to build systems that do a better job of encouraging and rewarding quality journalism. And we must work to help people be more discerning about the stories they read and the stories they watch. And I want to take you through what we're doing on these fronts and why we believe it's so important. First, let me say that for me personally, this is an important question. My kids are young, they're 8 and 9 years old, and if you think about it, they will probably never open a textbook in their entire lives. Every piece of information they get during their education is most likely going to come from online news sources. And yet today, they are not being taught in school how to tell the difference between a quality news source or those with loose standards or bad intent. We have a responsibility to give our children these tools, to give them curriculums that teach them how to think critically, to be smart, and to be discerning about the information they consume. This wasn't an issue when I was growing up. It wasn't an issue when most people in this room were growing up. At that time in the US, there was, 1 or 2 major newspapers that we read. We read our local paper. We watched 1 or 2 networks. News literacy wasn't a necessary skill. Now, anyone can publish anything. Anyone can call themselves a publisher. There are no barriers to entry. And while that's great news for more voices in the public square, it's important that we do equip people with tools that they need to make informed decisions about the sources of information they can trust. I want my children to grow up appreciating quality journalism, and that means knowing how to recognize trustworthy information and how to recognize things like false news. I'm proud to say this is important to Facebook too. In my new role, we are looking at all of this through the lens of the Facebook Journalism Project. FJP is a new program we launched a week after I started that was designed and aims to build stronger ties with the news industry. And we are approaching FJP with 3 pillars in mind. Number 1, collaborating with news organizations to help develop new products and formats for news on Facebook. Providing tools and trainings for journalists who use Facebook, both for storytelling and for news gathering. And working with publishers and educators on how we can equip people with the knowledge they need to be informed readers in the digital age. The 3rd pillar, as I mentioned, is what we're focused on this week, giving these tools and trainings to everyone who cares about news and information. It means news literacy, but it also means taking concrete steps to remove false news from our platform. I cannot say this enough or state it with enough emphasis. We do not want false news on our platform. And solving the problem of false news is very important to us. We're doing a number of things to try to stop it, also to go after the things that downgrade the quality of newsfeed, like clickbait, sensationalism, spam, and so on. Since we've ramped up these efforts, one of the important things that we've learned is that most of the people who are posting fake news are financially motivated. They've learned that they can write something that looks like a headline, is designed to get you to click, maybe it flatters your biases, or maybe it scares you. If you do click, they can then send you to a spammy page filled with ads and make money from those clicks. So we are working very aggressively now to disrupt their financial incentives for doing that. We're building new tools on the technology side to stop the spread of false news and hoaxes and try to improve information diversity on Facebook. We've made updates to Newsfeed to reduce the distribution of posts that lead people to click on a story that they then don't spend any time reading. That's a signal to us in Newsfeed that the headline is likely to be misleading. We've also built a system that identifies phrases that are commonly used in clickbaity headlines. And we've characterized these headlines as clickbait by weighing 2 key points. Does it withhold information? Does it mislead? Those posts with clickbait headlines will appear lower now in Newsfeed. This was a recent change we made. We're going to continue, obviously, to learn over time how to do this better, and we hope to continue expanding this work to reduce clickbait in even more languages. We can only do so much, though, on the tech side, and if we really want to end false news on Facebook across all platforms, we really do have to work on the education piece. There is no shortcut to this. We want to empower people to help identify the content when they see it on our platform, on all platforms. And another thing that we have done sort of in this realm, because I do think you have to come at this from so many different directions, is we launched a false news PSA globally, which is a tool to help users identify false news, to give them easier ways to report it. You may remember seeing this at the top of your news feed in April. We've also, as I said, improved the reporting tool around false news. It's easier to let our content moderators know now when you see something that shouldn't be on Facebook. We also want to support the experts who are out there, many of whom we spoke to this week in our meetings, who are looking at this, who are trying to do the research. We want to give them the resources to do the research, to convene events, to spread those learnings around the world. Some of our work, as I said, is already underway. Facebook helped fund and formed what some of you may have heard about, the News Integrity Initiative. We have a number of people who are participating in that with us here today. The Walkley Foundation, SOPA, were both founding members of it. This is an international coalition of tech, media companies, all working together to try to repair trust and create quality journalism in the digital age. All the stakeholders we are trying to bring together, universities, advertisers, media companies, social media, tech, everyone. It is going to take all of us. The initiative is going to fund research and projects, and again, convene meetings with industry experts. We've also worked, and we are a financial supporter of First Draft, which many of you are familiar with. We are working with them on news literacy events in Hong Kong and in Australia. And we are exploring news literacy programs with our media partners in Taiwan, research in Australia, and we have online media courses here in Hong Kong with the Hong Kong University. Let me be absolutely clear, though. None of these steps alone are going to solve this problem. And it is not just a problem for our platform, it is across all platforms. It's going to take all of us putting everything we can toward restoring credibility and trust in journalism and giving people the tools they need to not only be informed, but to understand. This is especially challenging here in APAC. My discussions this week with people have really highlighted that for me, how diverse and complex this region is. It is home to the world's largest mobile and internet population, and it includes connected places, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, but also some of the least connected, like India. For Facebook, it is also our largest and fastest growing region in the world, 716 monthly average users. We recognize the challenges of a region that's full of multiple languages, vastly different social, political, economic infrastructures, and various stages of media and tech evolution. This is not going to be easy. And we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to news literacy programs here or anywhere. And we can't do it without partners like you, like many of you here who are working with us. We recognize this is a long road ahead and that there is a lot more that we can do. But we can't wait. We are living through this massive transformation in how information is shared and spread. The channels, the platforms are changing. The pace is quickening. You all know that. The avalanche of information is getting bigger, and it's coming at us faster and faster. As we look ahead and as more people sign online to the internet for the very first time, like my kids, hopefully journalism will be in more demand and more necessary than ever. I know it will be more necessary than ever. Real, authentic, honest journalism, the kind that my mentors taught me to love and care about, and the kind of journalism that so many of you do here every single day. In my new role at Facebook, I plan to be a strong advocate for journalists internally. I'm going to do everything I can through the Facebook Journalism Project to work with the industry to support the future of journalism in the digital era. We recognize this is a long-term challenge, a long-term investment on our part. Our efforts are not going to pay off tomorrow, but we also know how much this matters, both here in APAC, in the US, and around the world. So I thank you for allowing me to be here today. I look forward to taking questions from many of you here in the room, and because it is my first trip to Hong Kong in this new role, I would also love to hear your comments and thoughts, because I'm very much in listening mode right now, and so what you tell me about the region and the challenges you're facing is really useful to me as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Campbell, for that interesting take on what Facebook is up to. There's no doubt that Facebook's really in the news at the moment for reasons both good and bad. I mean, we at the Financial Times, about an hour ago, we published a column that's going to appear in this weekend's Financial Times from our columnist Simon Cooper called "How Facebook is Changing Democracy." And there's some rather startling statistics in there, and I'm sure you'll be able to read it. It's up on the site now. And he talks about a political operative that he met who basically used Facebook to distribute videos for political purposes, and he doesn't say which country it is, but you know, he gives the example. You could have one of Theresa May saying Brexit is Brexit, and then you target different audiences, different age groups, different sex, and so on, and then you obviously get them to follow the message you want. And according to Simon, his friends spent about 50,000 euros to reach no less than 4 million voters. So you can see how this is a very cost-effective way of using social media. But anyway, we can read that article later. But it's definitely pretty interesting. I wanted to ask you first, before we open to the floor. Obviously, you're talking about curbing fake news, and there's been a lot of talk about trying to curb extremism as well. How do you strike the balance between doing that in a responsible way and in a way that I think we would more or less all agree with, and at the same time resist the pressure to essentially kowtow or to do the bidding of authoritarian governments around the world. We've had a lot of cases in, obviously, I presume you're not available in China, right? And we've had a lot of cases in Southeast Asia recently of governments essentially putting pressure on Facebook and other social media sites to take down things in Thailand, obviously about the king, in Indonesia, in Vietnam as well recently. How do you, and obviously the governments that do this would tend to cloak their appeals or their orders to Facebook and other social media sites under the guise of saying we're doing this because we're against pornography, we're against extremism and so on, but actually they might be doing it for entirely selfish political reasons. How do you strike that balance? What are your sort of dealings like with government when you try to, on the one hand, stop bad content, and on the other hand, not do the bidding of governments that actually want to stop good content? Sorry, you got to press the button and bring it forward. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. So let me stress that authenticity is incredibly important to us, and that really is our focus now. And as I was walking through a little bit earlier, there is a lot that we can do on the technology side around trying to put limits on false news, on hoaxes, anyone who's trying to manipulate content on the platform. We have security teams who are working on this, better ways to identify fake accounts and get them off the platform. So this is a big focus for us at the moment. Anything, anyone, any group, anyone who tries to limit speech or freedom of expression on the platform, that's a contradiction to who we are. I mean, our mission is to connect the world and to be an open platform. There is a balance, though. We have content standards, and that really, our content standards are our guiding principles around how we think about this. And we are trying to walk that line and find that balance between our content standards that define sort of how we make the decisions, and being as open a platform as we can to allow for as much free expression as possible.
Thanks. I mean, the big elephant in the room here is China. Are you talking to the Chinese authorities about being able to do what you want in China?
Our approach to China is to work with businesses and developers to, as they work to expand into other markets. Beyond that, our approach on China, we're interested in learning, obviously, and trying to understand the country, but our approach hasn't changed from what we've said many times in the past.
You can't get in, right? I mean, you can't. I can't. Can I open a Facebook page in China? I don't think I can.
Our focus in China is on businesses and developers and helping them expand to other markets.
Right, but not on making Facebook available.
News in China is not. I mean, I cover the news industry. That's not a focus of ours. It's on the business side.
Right, right. I just before we open up, I just want to raise one other issue. I'm kind of. It seems to me there's a bit of a contradiction. On the one hand, you're saying Facebook is a source of information, which it obviously is, and on the other hand, you're saying it's not a news organization. I think that's a bit confusing to people like me. I mean, just because you're a platform or an aggregator doesn't mean you're not publishing news. I mean, if you're linking to news, you're essentially publishing it in the legal sense. What is the difference there? Why are you not a news organization? I mean, you are. You talk about a news feed. You've talked about how you're an important source of news, which we all agree with. How can you, why do you say you're not a news organization?
I mean, I just disagree with your premise. There's a difference. As a journalist or a news organization, you're playing an editorial role. Facebook is a platform. I mean, I've worked for 20 years at 2 big media companies and have been in newsrooms where we do play an editorial role. At Facebook, it's different. It's a new kind of platform. Now, that said, I do believe that while Facebook is obviously not a news organization, it's a part of the news ecosystem. That's what I was trying to outline. And I think with that comes a responsibility to that ecosystem, and that means being a good partner and working with news organizations around issues like monetization, and also false news and how we ensure that the content on our platform is authentic.
Yeah, okay, I can see there's a lot of questions coming up here, so
Yep.
maybe we'll open it up right away because I can see that everyone's very enthusiastic. And I think Campbell has to leave at about 2. So if we can get a mic to the gentleman here. And if you could each say who you are before you ask the question, and then ask your question briefly.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I work for Civic Exchange, which is a think tank. But like you, I crossed to the dark side from the New York Times quite recently. So
Oh, no, Civic Exchange doesn't count as the dark side.
It does not. It's gray side, gray side. Okay, so before you went to Facebook, there was an issue. Downstairs in this historic club, we have a photograph by Nick Ut of the Vietnam War, and it's called Napalm Girl. It's a little girl. It's very famous. And there was an issue in late 2016 where Facebook censored because I presume it's an algorithm that just censors it because the girl is naked. And it went on to also bar the writer who wrote an article about this historic image. Facebook was heavily criticized for basically censorship, but also just not, an algorithm doesn't know the difference between child pornography and a historic photo that we think is so important that we keep it up in our club. At the time, Mark Zuckerberg said, we're a tech company, not a media company, which goes back to Victor's. So I guess my question is, how do you balance using technology to, get rid of pornography or fake news? Because there's some decisions that need to be made by a human being with common sense.
And that's why we have people who are, I mean, just so people understand in this particular case, the image was restored. And I think that's absolutely what should happen. I mean, they're gonna, given the amount of content on the platform, there's no perfect answer. There's no way, I don't care how much you put behind machine learning, it's never going to be perfect. And when there are mistakes, we should apologize for them and correct those mistakes immediately. And in this case, they restored the photo in question for obvious reasons. It had historical significance. It's a really important photo. So to me, given the amount of content on the platform, we have recently added 3,000 people to the 4,500 who are keeping track of content for cases like this. As I said before, though, I think in situations exactly like the one you're talking about, you just have to correct the mistake. Apologize for it, correct it, and make sure you're clear and transparent about the process and how you go about it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was just amazed by that number. So that's 7,500 people keeping track of content, is that right? Have I got that right? You said you added 3,000 to the 4,500.
Yeah, that was recently.
Sure, you haven't got them yet. No, it's just that it's...
No, but
it means that you have 14 times the number of editorial stuff that we do already.
Well, I would also say they're not, I mean, I wouldn't characterize them as editorial staff either.
Okay. Sorry, yeah.
Francis Moriarty, freelance. Perhaps I missed it during your speech.
Yep.
But when you're talking about false news, how do you define false? I didn't hear a definition.
When I'm talking about it, when we look at what we're focused on the platform, especially around the technology work, we're talking about hoaxes and the clickbaity kind of things where you see a headline, you click on that headline and it takes you to essentially, we call them ad farms, where it's basically very little content and it is financially motivated, designed for you to bring you there where they can make money on those ads. So, I mean, I'm not talking about sort of the gray area where editorial judgments need to be made or should be made. I don't think anybody wants Facebook to be the arbiter of truth on these things. I think that's the role of journalists. We have tried to employ, and we've done this in a number of other countries, and that's why we're partnering with First Draft, because I know they're trying to get a foothold here with third-party fact-checking organizations so that people can flag things that may fall into that gray area, and then third-party fact-checking organizations can write about it, do reporting around it. And I don't believe they have expanded their operations here yet, but I do think they're beginning to. First Draft. So does that help clarify it a little bit?
I think he wants the mic back.
Yeah, sorry.
Briefly, yeah.
It does a little bit, but I just think it would be good if we had a definition of what you call false news. If all that is something, you're trying to get rid of things that you click to go to someplace else where somebody's making money off the clicks.
No.
That has nothing to do with what the content might be. I mean, people do post things all the time. the 20 million member march that the press overlooked. I mean, you can come up with a whole line of them, which are completely bogus or have just a shred of truth, but something else is wrapped around it. You're not talking about any of that stuff at all.
I'm talking about what you said, hoaxes, things that are that are not true. I mean, and I'm not talking about things that need to be fact-checked that may have some truth, but are more opinion. I'm talking about the things that are untrue, the headline is misleading, where there's a clear case of a hoax that needs to be removed from the site.
But the way you identify it is by financial gain. So it's a kind of proxy for one type of fake news.
No,
but
what I said was that we're finding most of that type of content that is factually wrong is financially motivated. So we can see success by disrupting the financial incentives. It's similar to the work that was done with spammers. So it's on the technology side. I mean, it's easier, I think, to make progress there when that's what you're targeting.
Thank you. Right, we got, sorry, lady here, then a couple over there. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks. So I've got a question for both Victor and Campbell. Basically, we're already at this point in time where, and I appreciate what you're saying, Campbell, about the future, that we already have this issue that Facebook is facing, but actually any kind of, if you like, amalgamated news platform has this issue that two things. One, the information may be incorrect, it may be fake news, but we also have another issue in online media in particular, in that people customize the media that they receive. So in other words, they only receive stories that affirm their view of the world. And this is a big problem for the online platforms, because previously with newspapers, for example, you would subscribe to the FT or FT.com if you were an FT type of thinker, but if you're not, you just don't subscribe to that channel. Now you can really customize this. So I wonder two things. One is, in your education of the next generation, away from fake news, do you also think that amalgamated or greater news platforms have an obligation to teach the next generation about understanding different viewpoints? In other words, not selecting customized views to support one view.
Right.
And secondly, and this is going to really offend Victor, tomorrow's journalists, will they be that Oxbridge, Cambridge group that have been traditionally great journalists, as Victor is? But where will they come from? What will their experience be? What will their initial CV look like, do you think?
So
I'm sorry, can you just briefly introduce yourself? I don't think you did right at the beginning.
So my name is Angela Watkins. I used to work with Victor at the FT.
Yeah, no, I know who you are. I know who you are, but they don't.
So and I now don't work in media at all, but I'm just interested in this topic.
Yeah, so you're talking about sort of the filter bubble, which is how people refer to it, and that you hear being debated around social media. And I'm always struck when people raise this as though it's a new phenomenon. Think back, people often talk about the good old days. There's an element of nostalgia to when there was just one or two newspapers that we all read, and how we all, in the US, watched Walter Cronkite on the evening news, and that was the source of all our information. But I think it's important to note that there were no women or people of color in those newsrooms. So the news that you were getting in the quote-unquote good old days was very much a filter. It did not represent the perspectives of a lot of people in this room. And so the diversity that we have today, I think, is critically important. And what we're trying to do is figure out the balance with this diversity. Now, I disagree with what's happening on social media. I also hosted a show on CNN for a number of years, and it was right around the time President Obama was elected. And it was the time that MSNBC, which was my competition, decided to become very left-wing in their evening news shows. And Fox News, which was my competition on the other side, was the sort of right-wing version of news. And all anyone talked about, we all conveniently forget this, was, oh my gosh, the filter bubble of cable news. This host is going on the left, and everyone's going to be stuck in these filter bubbles, and they're only going to get one perspective. And the idea that somehow this has come about because of social media is absurd. It is, really important to note how things have evolved. And today, if you want to really examine Facebook and platforms, I'll talk about Facebook. Facebook strengthens your weak ties. So I grew up in Louisiana. I live in New York City. I am in touch and in contact with lots of my friends in Louisiana, people I went to high school with, that I would never be in touch with today were it not for Facebook. If it weren't for Facebook, I would be living in my little filter bubble of New York City, getting one political point of view. You can guess which one. Now, because I am in touch, because my ties are stronger with people that I normally wouldn't be in contact with because of Facebook, there is far more diversity in my newsfeed when it comes to different opinions and points of view than I would ever get if I were watching my one favorite cable news channel hanging out with my friends in New York City. So I just fundamentally disagree when people say that we are narrowly choosing to live in these little worlds on social media, because I would argue that going back to the good old days, it was far worse. And today, I think you do get that diversity on Facebook better than you would if you were watching one particular cable news program.
Thank you. This is definitely about Facebook, not about me, but I just want to say, because you asked me, I fundamentally disagree with you, actually, because I think Facebook does give you this extraordinary geographic diversity, which we didn't have before. You know, we are in contact with our friends when they're on other continents, but what it doesn't give you, because of the way we structure the group of our friends, is diversity of views. I mean, I'll give you my own example. I was an early adopter of Facebook. I have only one friend on Facebook who voted for Brexit that I know of, and I have no friends, and I've got lots of American and American Indian and American Chinese friends, no friends who voted for Trump. That is a bubble, you know, and the media, we were guilty because we are now living somewhat in these bubbles. And that wasn't the case before, because there was the serendipity of getting newspaper or newspapers. You know, you didn't just get the FT, you got the Financial Times and the Guardian, or the Financial Times and the Times, and, you know, and you did actually see things that you didn't expect to see. I think the problem with social media generally is that you see what you expect to see, and what you want to see, because they're your friends, right? So they agree with you. I think it's a fundamental problem. The geographic diversity is there, so we are in touch with people that we didn't used to be in touch with, even though they live a long way away, but we're not in touch with enough people whose views we fundamentally disagree with. I mean, just because otherwise they wouldn't be our friends, because we'd hate them, because they voted for Trump. I mean, you know, it's a big problem. Anyway, but yes, lady here, and then. Oh, so you've got the mic, so you first, and then yeah.
My name is Dennis Owen with Cathay Pacific, and just a question coming from your personal background: do you see Facebook as a media company or more of a technology company?
Well, having worked for two big media companies, it's very different. In the traditional sense, I mean, Facebook has long defined itself as a technology company, obviously, but it is different. It is a different kind of platform today, and that's why I have said there is a recognition that Facebook is part of the news ecosystem. It's obviously nothing like the places where I used to work, Time Warner or NBC, Comcast, but it is part of the news ecosystem, and so there is a responsibility there to be a partner with journalism. That's the reason we launched the Facebook Journalism Project, and the reason we're focused on all these issues, trying to figure out how we can better partner with news organizations for that reason.
Thank you. Just before we go on, if there's anyone on the balcony that I can't see who wants to ask a question, please sort of come forward and wave your hand. And I've got you there, so yes, and somebody over there. Okay, so you first.
Hi, I have a question related to...
Please say who you are.
Sorry.
So, yeah.
My name's Shukwa, I'm from Greenpeace. This is a question related to what was asked just over there. I feel like you answered it sort of philosophically, but I sort of would like an answer kind of technically.
Sure.
What would you say is the best way to sort of go through that filter bubble? Would you say it's like video, or is it like, you were saying how you're sort of clamping down on those sort of clickbaity articles, but, back in the day when a lot of that was through like HuffPo or like those women's magazines, that was sort of like all the rage, and now it's not. But like that was like a very successful model. So what would you say? Like, what do you think what is your sort of insider information into how to not just get stories but content that a lot of companies and news organizations are producing? Whether it's like video or like a photo series or something like that.
So breaking out, because you're right, that was a sort of big picture answer. I do want to clarify that I do think that we can offer broader perspectives, and there are ways. I mean, we're brainstorming with news organizations a lot of ways to think about that. One of the things we did when we launched FJP was sat down with a lot of different kinds of publishers to try to figure out what priorities are, and we created smaller working groups to focus on those. One of them is working on issues similar to this, and like I'll give you a couple of examples. So we launch related articles. So if you see a piece on a particular topic, it will surface other stories that are not identical but similar, that might not give you the opposite perspective per se, but will give you a more complete picture. And the reason, I mean, one of the factors that came into this is we were working with publishers talking about this and looking at a lot of the research. I think your knee-jerk reaction to sort of how you bring a different perspective in for someone would be, let's show them, if they're a Trump supporter, let's show them, something that's nice about Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. If they're a Bernie Sanders supporter, let's show them something nice about Trump. But what the research shows is actually if you present someone with a point of view that's the opposite of where they are, that they're actually even more dug in. It's even more polarizing. So the sort of better approach, if we're trying to get to a place where we all find common understanding around different issues, that giving people a more complete picture, a different take on a story, as opposed to creating situations where they're seeing the opposite point of view or opinion, is actually a lot more effective. So we're talking about these things internally and trying to experiment with ideas that make sense for publishers and make sense for us to surface a broader, I think, view of things, and we'll keep working on it. But I do think there's something there that's worth pursuing.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman there, and then we've only got time for one or two more questions, but you're next, yeah.
My name is Angus Forsyth. I'm a solicitor in private practice in Hong Kong. The President of the United States, who shall be nameless here, is very fond of expressing what he regards as false news. And he has a very large constituency who voted for him who quite likely believe him. I don't believe him very often. I'm quite clear that a lot of what he castigates as false news is not false and is genuine. As a journalist, don't you think there's a responsibility to argue with him again and again and again until the point is properly expressed as correct news?
Yeah, he's brilliantly transformed fake news into real news and real news into fake news. I mean, it was a masterpiece of media work. But, yeah.
He's very clever and not to be ignored.
So my role as a journalist ceased when I took the job at Facebook. So I will leave that to the journalists to decide how they want to cover Donald Trump.
Thank you. Yes, over there in the corner.
My name is Mark Erder. I'd like you to expand upon what Facebook is doing with news literacy projects, and are you actually supporting them at universities like Hong Kong U and Stony Brook? I know that a couple of months ago actually, a combination of Stony Brook and Hong Kong U people were talking about doing a promotional video to get in front of Mark Zuckerberg to get his support. This was maybe 2.5, 3 months ago. So you're saying that you guys are supporting them. That's a very, and I know that film wasn't made. So it's a very kind of rapid transformation.
We're moving as fast as we can.
Let's get his attention because we need money.
Yeah.
So now you're saying that you are supporting it. So are you actually supporting it with funding, financing?
So let me explain to you what we did. So when I started in January, we launched the Facebook Journalism Project. What we did, and they're very much aware of this. On news literacy in particular, we held a conference at Arizona State University at the Walter Cronkite School, where people came in from all over the globe to have sort of a let's sit down and figure out what our priorities need to be, where we need to focus, what regions are the most urgent, what's the best approach, who should be doing research on what. Coming out of this meeting, it was very clear that we need to have a mechanism to provide funding to people who are doing research, who are convening more events, and then as they figure out ways to disseminate all this information. So we founded with CUNY, which is sort of, I guess, is kind of leading the effort, but we're one of a number of funders, but we started with CUNY, the News Integrity Initiative. And it is now both a fund and an advisory board that's evaluating proposals. They just announced a new executive director a few weeks ago. This is all very new. I mean, as I said before, we are going as fast as we can because we do feel there's an urgency there. And these universities in particular are key to this. And we want to let them take the lead. That's why we sort of handed it off to CUNY and said, we'll provide the funding and whatever support you need from us. But this, in my view, should be led by the universities and not necessarily the platforms. We are there to support it however we can, but this was what this event was at the Hong Kong University, was our sort of first gathering here locally to bring, I think it was, we had about 40 experts in the news literacy, really for this region in particular. And as you know, I don't have to tell you, it's very hard to talk about sort of APAC because it's just far too diverse. So we really needed to prioritize and set goals for what we wanted to do. And this has all come about really within the last 2 months with the launch of the News Integrity Initiative. So now that it's up and running, we'll be seeing lots of different organizations, and I'm sure these universities apply for funding to do the research projects that really need to be done.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid this has to be the last question because Campbell has to go, but I hope you're going to ask about the money and how Facebook and Google are monopolizing the advertising revenues of the content providers whose content they display, but I fear you might not be.
But he's not going to tell you what to ask. I mean, you can ask whatever you want. But
you can ask whatever you want.
Let me outline the question
yes,
for you.
Go ahead.
My name is John Antweiler. I'm a retired banker. So I'd love to talk about the money aspect of it, but actually I had a question. Are there 4 or 5 rules of Campbell that you would offer as a guide to spot false news?
You know, it's so funny. Because again, there is a skill set that we have to teach our kids. I mean, this is not something that any of us, as I said before, needed because we just had far fewer sources of information. But I think, you know, this is you know, I don't have to sort of outline for you what specifically you know, are identifying factors, I don't think. But I think what's more challenging are when there's a question and a doubt, right? So it's sort of when things fall into the gray area, and that's where we need to beef up, you know, especially in this region. We've had success with it in the US and in parts of Europe, but the third-party fact-checking organizations, so that, for example, if you see something or someone shares something with you that you have a question about, we don't have this here yet, but we have it in Europe and the US, you can flag it. And 2 fact-checking organizations will look at it, and then if they both agree that it's questionable, put a disputed flag on it. That disputed flag automatically downranks the post. And if someone sends it to you, you then get a notice across your post that says this story in question is being disputed. And what we found is that people are less likely to share something, obviously, that has that kind of post. So it limits the engagement of things in question. You know, there's, apart from doing your own fact checking, we need more support from be it news organizations or third-party organizations, that can do fact-checking in a much more aggressive way, in a much bigger way. That's just something that, given the limited sources of information, wasn't as necessary before. But it's something, again, that as part of FJP, we want to support. First Draft has kind of been leading the effort, this organization globally, trying to bring together, given the country, like different partners who could work with them around fact-checking. And my hope is we will be very supportive of them with whatever resources they need, that they can get a foothold here and be able to expand into a number of countries here, working with publishers in that role. Would you like me to answer the money question?
Yes, yes. I see the audience is keen
I mean,
too, yeah.
I'm not sure that it will be as satisfying as you would like, but as I said before, the Facebook Journalism Project, we kind of divided it into pillars. And the first one is about our partnership on product development with news organizations. And a big piece of this is on monetization. We recognize that publishers are struggling and trying to find new business models that are going to be sustainable over the long term. The challenge here is it's different for different publishers. So we're coming at this from many different directions. Some are focused on a subscription model. Some are in video and are looking for us to do ad breaks that they can monetize. Some are focused almost entirely on branded content. So I think one of the challenges is there is no one-size-fits-all on monetization, but we are doing everything we can to ramp up on multiple fronts to work with publishers and to be a better partner on this front. So it's a priority. We've made it a priority. And hopefully people will see better results.
Thank you very much.
I have one last question, please.
Very briefly, yes.
It's actually from Ying Chan, who used to be the head of the Hong Kong U
Yep.
School of Journalism. She knows how much has been contributed to CUNY, but asks how much has been contributed in Asia.
So the way the program is set up with CUNY is organizations, CUNY is operating a fund. So organizations in Asia or any part of the world can apply for funding through CUNY, who's just operating the fund. It's like kind of the nonprofit manager of the fund.
Right, so there's no specific money set aside.
I have no idea if they've applied for funding or grant funding. We're not managing it, but ask her if she applied for funding. I don't know if she has.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure.
Thank you so much, Campbell. I mean, one thing is clear is that Facebook is an extraordinarily powerful organization, and as you said yourself, you're growing very fast and you're struggling to catch up just on staffing and everything else. So it was really good of you to come, and we're very grateful for your talk, and thank you very much. And we have a small gift. Yes, you can applaud. This is for old time's sake. Remember paper?
Yeah, vaguely.
So yes, I think we've gone very retro actually.
That's
on this,
great.
yeah,
That's
but anyway,
wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
so much.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.